Hello and welcome to the part 3. So I think this will be the worst part, mainly because we're gonna do some coding and I'm not that good at coding, although I managed to figure out how to do this setup for us, and hopefully it's gonna help us to explore all the VFX and additional setups maybe later on. But let's try to make this work in terms of our VFX setup. So I did some planning before recording this video, and I figured out what we need to do before we will start coding. So let's get to that first. Right, so previously we've created 3 materials for our templates, so I'm just gonna rename them. I'm gonna call it template projectile. It's gonna be template impact. And this one's gonna be template cast. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of those numbers at the end. Okay, so our cast, we can pick color here. We're gonna make it orange, and we're gonna put 20 into the alpha value, and also make sure that it's transparent. Okay, for the impact, make sure it's transparent as well. Our impact will be, let's make it red, and the alpha value will be 20 as well. And as for the projectile, maybe let's make it red as well, but the material, make sure it's opaque and there is no alpha values at all. Okay, so let's drag our templates onto the screen. And let's just assign the materials. I also shrunk the projectile to 0.3, so open the projectile template, select projectile, and put 0.3 into the scale. And let's add maybe rigid body as well to the projectile and disable gravity and collision as well, collision sphere. The radius of it, make it maybe 0.2 and set it to be a trigger as well. Okay, so our projectile actually points to the projectile material. So I'm gonna save the prefab and get rid of from the scene. Our cast does have the collider, which we don't need, so get rid of it if you have it there. It points to impact material, so change that to cast instead. I'm gonna save the prefab, get rid of it from the scene, and do the same for the impact as well. So get rid of the collision and make sure it points to template impact material. Okay, the next thing would be to add the locations from where we want to fire our cast VFX and the projectile as well. So I want to fire it from this hand, because the animation, in animation this character fires our attacks with this hand. So I'm gonna go into this character, into the rig, and try to navigate and find that hand or bone that is basically responsible. I will be responsible for firing this projectile. So I'm gonna select this bone and I'm gonna create empty game object. I'm gonna call it projectile fire location. I'm gonna duplicate it and call it cast location. I'm gonna select both those game objects and try to find the middle of his hand. Somewhere here. Okay, I'm gonna save the character. And the next thing we need to do would be to maybe explore the animation. Yeah, our animator. So basically, if you select your player and go to the animation tab, and select the default attack. Well, I'm using default attack. You probably will be using maybe a different animation file, mainly because you might have a different character. But I think the everything we're doing here is transferable. So as you can see, I cannot add any event here because this animation is imported. So all I have to do, I have to create my own animation. So let's go to the layer, add another layer that we're gonna call fire projectile. I'm gonna create a trigger as well, and I'm gonna call it fire projectile as well. And in our fire projectile layer, make sure the weight is set to 1, otherwise it's not gonna work. And maybe create some empty state here for the entry, because you know it's not gonna do anything. And then let's create empty state here, and let's call it fire projectile. And we're gonna make a transition to this under condition of fire projectile. So this will be our trigger. Okay, so now we need to supply the animation to be here. So I'm gonna go to my animators folder, create, and I'm gonna create animation. I'm gonna call it attack. Okay, right. So the problem with Unity animations is that the default is set to 60 FPS. But the ones that you usually import from, you know, with the character, they usually come with 30 FPS, right? So I'm gonna just go to debug and change the default 60 to 30. In order to double check, what you should be using is just select your any animation for your character, and if you select it here, oops, there it is. So you can see what's the FPS on that animation. So make sure that the animation you create has got exactly the same FPS. Okay. Right. So let's go to our base layer and select our attack animation again. So I'm going to select default attack. I'm gonna select the scene, so actually I can see when the animation happens. Okay, so I think it will be around here, 22, and I switched to frames instead of seconds, so it will be around 22nd frame. So now I need to go to animator, fire projectile layer, and in here I'm actually gonna add my attack animation, which should be empty. So if you go to this drop down menu, you should see attack. I'm gonna go to 22. I'm gonna double check if it's on frames, and it is. So I'm just gonna right click here and add animation event. So currently there are no events, which is correct, because we're gonna set up the event in code. So basically we're gonna create a function in code, and we're gonna call that function on that frame. And also what we're gonna do, we're gonna trigger this animation with the set trigger command from code. So I'm just gonna save our prefab, save scene, and save the project as well. Okay, the next thing might be the collision on our target. So we've created this prefab collision, so I suggest you disable that one. Right click on the collision, copy component, and basically paste it here, right? So right click and paste component as new, and add some offset to it here. okay, and set it to trigger as well, just to make sure that our target will actually have a collision when his animator is as well. And you might as well just disable this game object that we've created in the previous video, because we won't be needing that anymore. Okay, and now let's get into this tricky part of this video, and we're gonna do some coding. Okay, so I'm gonna create a folder. I'm gonna call it scripts, and I'm gonna create our first script, which will be projectile fire, and I'm gonna attach this to our player. Okay, so there are a few things that we will need. I won't be going through the code in terms of explaining everything, because that'll take very long time, and also I think it will be very confusing. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to just I'll try to explain what I'm doing in the code, and I hope that you will understand this code. Otherwise, just maybe retype it, what I'm doing here, and hopefully you will get the same results. So first I need to define two public game objects, and those will be for the locations. Okay, so this will be projectile fire location, and another public game object, and this will be our cast location. And we will need projectile speed as well, so we're gonna do public float projectile speed, and last two, I think we will need actual projectile prefab, and we will need a cast prefab as well. Okay, cool. So projectile fire location, it will be those two sockets that we've created in the rig. So basically those will be defining locations where we're firing our projectile from. Speed, I mean, self-explanatory, and then two game objects, which will be our VFX for the cast and for the projectile. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of the start function, and in update I'm gonna say if input get key down key code, and I'm gonna use Z button on my keyboard, right? So whenever I press Z or Z button on my keyboard, this is gonna happen. Right, so what we want to happen, we want to first run our animation of the cast, okay, our cast animation. So we will need to get component and communicate with animator and say set trigger. I'm gonna use cast because that's what we named that trigger in our animator. Okay. And while the cast animation will be happening, we need to fire our projectile. So we will set, animator, cool. And we're gonna set another trigger, and this will be to fire our second layer that we've created. So we can actually, get to that 20-second frame, and we can fire our projectile in this code. So we're gonna, just make sure this animation runs as well, and we called it fire projectile. And now I'm going to create that function that we're going to run in our animator. Okay, so I'm going to say void fire projectile event. And here I'm going to define a game object. I'm going to say it's clone, instantiated. So what I'm going to instantiate? I'm going to instantiate my projectile prefab. Where I want this to appear? I want this to appear at projectile fire location, transform position, and quaternion identity. Right, so now I can access our clone. So I'm going to say clone, get component, because I need to get access to velocity, so rigid body. Velocity equals this game object, transform forward, because I want the projectile to move always forward. It doesn't matter what sort of rotation player has, it's just gonna, launch the projectile forward, which is what we want. And I'm gonna put times projectile and projectile speed. Okay, and I think the last one, what we want also to instantiate our cast. So I'm going to use instantiate cast prefab. The location of it will be cast location, transform position, and quaternion identity. Okay, so we've got this. My only concern is that I wonder if we added actually rigid body to the projectile, because I can't remember. So let me double check. Okay, so we have those parameters. They appear based, those are the public game objects. So let's go to our projectile first and let's see if it's got a rigid body, because we will be accessing that rigid body through in code. Right, so we've added it, that's cool. So I'm gonna put cast prefab here. I'm gonna put projectile template here. I'm gonna say 10 for now for the speed, and I need 2 sockets location that we've created in this character rig. So this will be our projectile fire location and our cast location. I'm gonna save the prefab as well. And see if that works. Okay, so the animation works, but nothing happens, and we've got an error. And it's something to do with the animator, because we actually forgot to set up this function. So select your fire projectile animation, select the player so we can get access to the animations. I'm gonna select attack, and in here on 22nd frame I got nothing, and I need to actually look for this fire projectile event that we set up in code. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so we got cast projectile. Okay, that's cool. So now maybe let's try for our projectile to interact with the target. So I'm gonna go and create another script, and that will be our target. And I'm gonna attach it to our target character. Okay, so what we need in our character, let's see if our target character actually, I think it has, I think we set it up, the the trigger for the hit. So maybe let's just carry on. And if that won't be an issue, we're gonna add it later on. So what we need to trigger the animation as an event, okay? So let's create a void trigger hit animation. So we're gonna get component animator, set trigger, and I think we called it hit. I might be wrong, but let's just double check. So let's go to our animator. And select our target. And it seems like we got hit set up. Although it seems like under layer I actually don't have the animation set up, or it might be a Unity bug. Let's see. So if I go to parameters and trigger it manually, it seems like the animation is actually happening. So I think under layers my graph does not appear. So I'm going to reset the Unity in a second and just double check. Okay, so I did restart the Unity, and as you can see, the my graphs appears again. Okay, so yeah, we've got a hit animation set up, which is cool because we want to trigger it. But the way we're going to trigger it, we're actually going to trigger it from our projectile. So let's head to our script and create our projectile script. I'm gonna go to templates as well. I'm gonna select our projectile template, go back to scripts, and actually drag the script onto the projectile. Okay, so what we need here, we need to know if we did hit the target. And also we're going to provide the impact effect here. So game object impact, public game object impact. And then we're going to use on trigger enter. And I'm going to say if other tag equals double equals what we called it, I think target, then this will happen. So what we want to happen, we want to trigger the function that we set up for our target. So it will be other get component I think it was target, yeah, because I've got target here and our script is called target. So I'm gonna say target, and I want to use our trigger. I can't remember, so I need to go to my trigger. Right, but this needs to be public. Okay, so this will be public function, so we can actually call it from here. Yep, okay, and we're gonna call that function. We're gonna instantiate our impact at current position, so it'll be transform position, and we're gonna use quaternion identity. Okay, and we want to destroy our projectile, so I'm gonna say destroy game object. Let's go back to Unity. And let's see if that works. So we go cast, projectile. Right, so we got animation, but the projectile went through, and I think it went through because we have an error message. Because I think we forgot about something. So let's go about our template, and I think we forgot to, yep, provide the impact. So drag the impact here, save the project just in case, and let's try again. So we go cast, projectile, impact, and then projectile disappears. Let's try again. Great. Right, and the last script I want to create, it will be our destroyed script. Okay, so basically, whenever there is something in the scene like our cast and impact, for example, that we want to destroy after some time, because we don't want this to hang around forever, and those will be particle systems. So obviously we want to, you know, get rid of those particle systems once they stop playing a desired effect. Okay, so let's have maybe public float, and this will be time to destroy. In start, we actually go, we need another function, so we're gonna say void destroy me function. And in here, we're gonna use invoke. Now we're gonna say destroy me after time to destroy float. Okay, and in here we're just gonna type destroy game object. Although I think there might be a better way to set it up. So instead of using invoke, we could say, or we could just call this method, so destroy me, but we're gonna provide our time to destroy in here. Yeah, I think there was a typo. Oh no, actually here. Right, and here I need to have float time to, I'm just gonna call it destroy. And then here I'm gonna provide this I think it needs to destroy me. Right, destroy me time. I think we're just having too many the same names for stuff. And also I think I forgot to mention that we need to destroy game object. Right, it seems like this is working, hopefully. Right, so let's go back to Unity. I'm going to select now my templates. I'm going to select my cast and my impact as well. I'm going to head to scripts and add destroy function, right? And let's say I'm going to put 1 here as a 1 second. So after 1 second, I want my impact and my cast to disappear. Let's see if that works. Great. Awesome. Okay. So we want 1 error, or it's a previous error. Let's try again. Yeah, that was a previous error, because I don't have any errors here in the console anymore. Okay. Whew. Okay, so that's a part where we actually coded stuff done. I hope we won't have to code again for now. And in the next part, let's just replace our templates with actual particle system, and hopefully that will be it. Thanks for watching.